He once proposed 3 times before she said yes. She once refused to merge finances even after their wedding. And now, 25 years later, the man who's written down every day of their life together is finally writing the hardest entries yet. James Brolin is 83 years old, and just this year he turned down a $2 million film offer, not because he's tired, not because he's done, but because home, and the woman inside it, needs him more than Hollywood ever could. Insiders say he told producers, "I just can't commit right now." Their once separate bank accounts have now merged. Medical bills are mounting, and for the first time in their 25-year marriage, the most unshakable couple in showbiz is facing the one thing they never rehearsed for. A new chapter that may be their most fragile yet. It began as a private experiment, just a small notebook tucked beside James Brolin's nightstand, a place to jot down thoughts before bed. But by the 3rd week of dating Barbra Streisand, it had quietly transformed into something far more intentional. A living archive of their relationship, written one day at a time. Each entry was brief at first, a note about her laugh when she misread a crossword clue, a line about the way she stirred her coffee clockwise, always stopping at 12 o'clock on the rim. But as the days turned into months, Brolin's pages grew longer, more intricate, more intimate. He documented everything, the books they read in bed, the nicknames they gave each other's bad habits, the routine arguments over thermostat settings and misplaced glasses. The journal became not just a timeline, but a textured emotional map of their life together. He wrote through triumphs, like the standing ovation Streisand received after a rare concert comeback, and through setbacks, such as her late-night anxiety over a memoir deadline or the insomnia that once returned during a health scare. When they traveled, he carried a smaller pocket-sized version. When she was away, he left blank pages with penciled titles like "Waiting for Her Voice" or "The Day Felt Too Wide Without Her." He never told her he was doing it, not until years in, and even then he didn't explain its purpose. She discovered a volume by accident, half buried beneath winter scarves in the back of a linen closet. She opened it and found pages dedicated to the moment she lost her earring in their koi pond, and how he spent the entire next morning combing through water lilies with a colander, not because the earring mattered, but because she looked sad in a way she didn't want me to notice. She cried that night. Not because the words were romantic, but because they were honest. They weren't filtered or performed. They were the tiny, invisible threads of real love, messy, ordinary, and deeply observant. From that point on, she allowed it, quietly, never asking about it again. And he never stopped writing. What began as a record of devotion slowly became a mirror, one that captured how love matures when no one's watching. It was a date neither of them wanted to go on. Barbra Streisand had already canceled twice. James Brolin was supposed to meet someone else entirely that night. The setup was a favor, a low-expectation gesture from their mutual friend Linda Bruckheimer, who believed, perhaps stubbornly, that they just had to meet. On July 1st, 1996, they finally did. But even then, it wasn't magic at first sight. He showed up clean-shaven, prepping for a role that required it. She expected a rugged, bearded type, someone who looked like he worked with his hands, not someone who looked like he had a personal stylist. Within 30 seconds, she blurted out, "Who messed up your hair?" The line wasn't meant to offend, but it landed with a thud. His ex-wife had spent over a decade never commenting on his appearance. Now here was a woman he'd just met, slicing straight through the silence with surgical precision. He almost left. He later admitted that her bluntness stung in a way he hadn't anticipated. But there was something in her eyes, an amused honesty that made him stay. He didn't know it then, but that single offhand comment would be the first line in a much longer story. They ended up talking for 6 hours. No agenda, no interview-style vetting, just 2 people well into their 50s, sharing life stories that didn't require embellishment. By midnight, they were leaning in closer. By 3:27 a.m., Streisand asked for a lock of his hair, not as a joke, not as a flirtation, but as a moment she wanted to keep. She later framed it, placing it beside a note she wrote to herself that same morning. "Something is different. He doesn't disappear when I blink." That night didn't feel like destiny. It felt strange. Like meeting someone you were already familiar with, but couldn't remember how. And maybe that's because, in a way, they were. Born just 3 miles apart in Los Angeles, raised under the same California sun, each bearing their own storms long before they ever crossed paths. She was cautious. He was wounded. Neither believed the story would last. But something had already begun. James Brolin had always played men who were sure of themselves, confident doctors, commanding detectives, stoic cowboys. But in real life, when it came to Barbra Streisand, he hesitated at all the wrong moments and lunged forward at the even worse ones. He knew early on. Within months, he was already imagining forever. What he didn't expect was that forever might need more than one attempt. The first proposal came on a clear autumn morning, 87 days after their first date. Brolin had arranged a hot air balloon ride over Napa Valley. As the sun burned mist off the vineyards below, he handed her a box holding a 3.9-carat diamond ring, custom cut, quietly extravagant. She looked at it, then at him, and said no. Not cruelly. Just honestly. She had a rule. No life-altering decisions for at least 2 years. After a previously failed engagement had unraveled her trust, she wasn't going to be swept up by timing or theatrics, no matter how charming the man or how breathtaking the view. The second time was more intimate. New Year's Eve 1997, in a Manhattan apartment surrounded by close friends and the soft strains of her favorite childhood song. As midnight approached, he stood up, heart thudding, and proposed again, this time with words more than jewels. Again, she declined. Not because she didn't love him, but because she still feared the possibility that love alone wasn't enough to guarantee longevity. But Barbra Streisand had a secret, one Brolin wouldn't know until years later, long after the ring was on her finger. When they met, she had been engaged to another man, quietly, privately. The relationship was already unraveling, but the promise was still on paper. After her 5th date with Brolin, she ended it. Abruptly, cleanly. She never told Brolin at the time, afraid it would make everything feel complicated. And for once, she didn't want complicated. The third proposal came on a quiet March afternoon in 1998 in the backyard of her Malibu estate. No crowd, no stage lights, no pressure, just a picnic blanket, lemon water, and a thick envelope. Inside, a 24-page handwritten letter titled, 98 Reasons Why You and I Make Sense. There was no diamond this time, no countdown clock, just truth. His truth. She read every word, then looked up and whispered, okay. It wasn't a surrender, it was an agreement. 2 stubborn lives finally deciding to move forward, together. They didn't want a spectacle, but they got one anyway. On July 1st, 1998, exactly 2 years to the day after their first date, James Brolin and Barbra Streisand were married in what became one of the most private and meticulously protected ceremonies in Hollywood history. The location, Streisand's secluded Malibu estate. The cost, $1.4 million. And the guest list? A constellation of icons, from Tom Hanks to the Clintons, all sworn to silence by $250,000 NDAs. Security was tighter than at most film premieres. There were 37 guards stationed across the property. A temporary no-fly zone was established above the estate. Even the catering staff had to pass background checks. Streisand, never one to do things halfway, wore a custom-designed gown with a 27-foot train, while Brolin arrived in a tailored Armani tuxedo with diamond cufflinks, each engraved with their wedding date. But for all the grandeur, the most unforgettable moments weren't choreographed. The ceremony began at precisely 8:47 p.m., the exact time they first met, 2 years earlier. Streisand had composed a song just for the occasion, I've Finally Found You, which was performed by a children's choir from her foundation. It was not about performance. It was about personal history turned sacred ritual. Later that night, Brolin gave a speech. It was only 273 words long, but every word landed. Sleeping is a waste of time, he said, pausing just enough to look her in the eyes. I can't wait to see her again in the morning. That line, quiet and unscripted, ended up framed in their home, above a photo of them laughing barefoot in the kitchen 2 weeks after the wedding. And then came real life. The glamour faded, and in its place grew a rhythm, a kind of domestic choreography they never shared with the world but relied on daily. Mornings began with a shared pot of coffee, black for him, almond milk for her. He always read the obituaries first. She hated that. She always answered emails in bed. He loved that, though she didn't know it. They made lists on yellow notepads, took walks in silence, set timers for screen time. Dinner was often takeout from the same two restaurants, always split down the middle, a rule Brolin insisted on from day one. The man who had lost millions in a divorce was not about to let money cloud something this rare. She respected that. And so, what began as a $1.4 million celebration turned into something far more valuable. A partnership grounded in predictable rituals, emotional transparency, and a shared reverence for the ordinary. Because for them, love wasn't about big moments. It was about showing up for the small ones, over and over again. From the outside, it looked like an odd arrangement. Two people deeply in love, devoted in every other way, who refused to merge their finances. Even after marriage. Even after matching wedding rings and shared toothbrush drawers. But for James Brolin and Barbra Streisand, love was never about dependency. It was about autonomy and survival. Especially for him. After his second divorce left him nearly $3 million in debt, Brolin swore he'd never again let finances complicate intimacy. Money, he believed, had a way of distorting intentions. So, when he married one of the wealthiest women in Hollywood, he didn't just bring a prenup, he brought a principle: bifurcation. They kept separate bank accounts, separate credit cards, and for years, even split dinner bills. Not because they didn't trust each other, but because they did. Brolin wanted a marriage where each act of generosity was deliberate, not automatic, where love wasn't confused with entitlement. And Streisand, who had spent decades being told she was too controlling, too independent, too much, understood that boundary better than anyone. The only shared account was one dedicated to household expenses. It had a fixed balance of $800,000 and was used strictly for upkeep of their Malibu estate. The gardens, the soundproofed bedroom, the koi pond where she once lost an earring he spent all morning recovering. In interviews, Brolin spoke candidly about the setup. He said, "We never had a single fight about money, not one, and in Hollywood that's rare." And it wasn't just about bills. It was about philosophy. In their home, equality wasn't measured in net worth, but in time spent, thoughts shared, care given. She had a $400 million empire. He had a resume of 97 films and a mechanic's mindset, but in the quiet corners of their daily life they were equals. Not in power, but in partnership. Their bifurcated finances became a metaphor for how they handled everything else, with mutual respect, clear communication, and a reverence for personal space inside their shared world. And in a town where marriages often collapse under the weight of blurred boundaries, theirs stood firm, because the lines had been drawn with love. While much of the world unraveled in 2020, behind the gates of a Malibu estate, something extraordinary was happening. For James Brolin and Barbra Streisand, the COVID lockdown didn't drive them apart. It pulled them closer than ever before. What was supposed to be a few weeks indoors became 425 uninterrupted nights together, a stretch of time they hadn't experienced since their earliest years. And rather than grow restless or resentful, they adapted. Then they thrived. Their bedroom, already something of a sanctuary, was transformed into a command center. The couple affectionately renamed it the boardroom. The centerpiece? A $35,000 custom-made Swedish mattress, engineered with dual lumbar zones, fold-out writing panels, and enough ergonomic wizardry to make it a multifunctional haven. It's where she wrote songs for her 2018 album, where he drafted narration notes, and where they did what they always did best: figure things out together. Each morning began at 6:45 a.m. with meditation, followed by a quiet breakfast prepared side by side. Sometimes eggs, sometimes fruit, always intention. They made schedules on notepads, watched documentaries in the early afternoons, and by evening, dove headfirst into The Crown and Bridgerton. Not once, but twice, each time reenacting scenes in full costume, down to Barbra's hand-stitched bonnet and Brolin's makeshift cravat fashioned from an old bathrobe sash. Then came the puzzles, 37 of them to be exact, one for each year of marriage they could still have ahead of them. The puzzles weren't about distraction, they were about ritual, control in a time of chaos. A way to stay engaged not just with the pieces, but with each other. But it wasn't all harmony. Tensions rose, just like in any household. When they fought, which they did, they followed a strict protocol. No yelling, no texting, no walking out. Instead, they'd take walks. Literally. opposite directions around their 3.2-acre estate, walking in silence with deep breaths every 30 steps. After 17 minutes, they'd meet back at the same spot and write down what they were feeling. No confrontation, just reflection. They did this over 200 times. Once, during a disagreement over edits in Streisand's memoir, they took 7 walks over 3 days. That was the rhythm of their golden lockdown era. Disciplined, tender, and above all present. They weren't racing back to normal. They were redefining what normal even meant. While other relationships buckled under forced proximity, theirs deepened, not in spectacle, but in stillness. In the quiet spaces between the chaos, they found each other again and fell in love all over. As of 2025, Brolin is still active. He starred in Ransom Canyon on Netflix, filmed across 150 miles in New Mexico. He played Cap Fuller, a rancher who dies in episode 9. He also narrated all 3 seasons of Sweet Tooth. But something has changed. In private meetings with producers, he said the same thing. "I can't commit right now." He turned down a $2 million offer, and for the first time since 1998, the couple has merged their finances. Sources close to the couple say medical bills are involved. No one's confirmed whose, but longtime friends say the mood has shifted. Fewer public appearances, less time on set, more time at home. Brolin delivered the journal on their 25th anniversary. It was 25 volumes, each bound in soft leather, wrapped with a ribbon and a note. "This is our story. You lived it. I recorded it." Streisand cried for over an hour. She said it felt like someone had painted her life from behind a mirror. From the parts she didn't see, the quiet, mundane, beautiful moments she never realized someone else was treasuring. But now, those pages are turning. And they read differently. Lately, the entries are shorter, more reflective, less about what happened that day, and more about what might happen next. There are phrases like, "just in case," and "if I forget, remind me," sprinkled between memories of crossword puzzles and tulip arrangements. The man who once said, "every night is a new adventure," is preparing for a time when the mornings might not come so easily. James Brolin isn't disappearing. He's just reprioritizing. From the boy who rode 17 miles to copy James Dean's walk, to the Emmy-winning actor who lived in his car, to the husband who redefined what Hollywood love could look like, he's always made the next chapter count. And this one may be the most powerful yet. So the real question isn't how it ends. It's how much of it we take with us. If this story moved you, give it a like. Subscribe for more real Hollywood love stories you've never heard before. Because sometimes the most epic love story is the one written by hand, in the quiet moments no one sees.